There's a moment in every woman's life when she realizes that the people she's loved most have been taking her for granted all along. For me, Anna Washington, that moment came at Gate 42 of Denver International Airport on a Tuesday morning that would change everything I thought I knew about family, loyalty, and my own worth. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I had raised my daughter Rebecca to be strong, independent, and successful. What I didn't expect was that she would become so successful at dismissing me. At 73 years old, I thought I had seen every kind of heartbreak life could offer. I was wrong. The morning started like any other travel day. I had packed my small carry-on with care, folding each piece of clothing with the precision that comes from decades of being a mother who made sure everything was perfect for everyone else. My medications were sorted in their weekly dispenser, my travel documents organized in the leather folder Rebecca had given me for Christmas 3 years ago. I even wore the navy blue pantsuit she had complimented once, thinking it would make her smile when she saw me at the gate. My name is Anna Washington, and I need to tell you about the day my daughter taught me that sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest. I'm 73 years old, a widow of 8 years, and until that Tuesday morning, I believed that family meant never having to question whether you belonged. I had been looking forward to this trip for months. Rebecca had called me in March, her voice bright with excitement as she described their planned vacation to Costa Rica. "Mom, we're finally doing it. Dave got that promotion and we're taking the kids somewhere special. Wouldn't it be wonderful if you could join us?" The way she said it made it sound like the most natural thing in the world, like I was already part of their plans, not an afterthought being graciously included. For weeks, I researched Costa Rica. I bought new clothes, updated my passport, and even started taking Spanish lessons online. The anticipation gave me something to look forward to, something to break up the quiet routine of my days. Since my husband Walter passed, the house had felt too big, too silent. This trip felt like a bridge back to feeling like I mattered to someone. I arrived at the airport 2 hours early, as I always do. Old habits from raising children, I suppose. Rebecca had texted me the night before with our gate information and flight details. "See you at gate 42, Mom. Flight leaves at 10:45 a.m. Simple. Clear. I felt that familiar flutter of excitement as I made my way through security, thinking about spending time with my grandchildren, seeing Rebecca relax for once, maybe even having some meaningful conversations during those long flights. Gate 42 was already bustling with travelers when I arrived. I found a seat with a good view of the boarding area and settled in with my book, glancing up occasionally to watch for Rebecca and her family. The morning sun streamed through the terminal windows, and I felt genuinely happy for the first time in months. At 9:30, I spotted them. Rebecca was walking briskly, her husband Dave pulling their large suitcase behind him, while their 2 children, Emma and Michael, trailed behind with their backpacks. Rebecca looked polished as always, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the early morning, her travel outfit coordinated in shades of cream and gold. She had always been beautiful, my Rebecca, but there was something different about her demeanor that morning. Something I couldn't quite identify. I stood up and waved, expecting the usual rush of hugs and excited chatter. Instead, Rebecca approached me with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mom, hi, we need to talk." Those 4 words sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the airport air conditioning. Dave was avoiding my gaze, suddenly very interested in checking his phone. The children gave me quick hugs, but they seemed distracted, not their usual enthusiastic selves. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light even as my stomach began to knot. Rebecca glanced around the busy gate area, then back at me. "Mom, I'm so sorry, but there's been a change of plans. We can't take you with us on this trip." The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually felt my knees weaken. "What do you mean? I don't understand. We've been planning this for months." "I know, and I feel terrible about it, but Dave's boss decided to join us at the last minute, and it's turned into more of a business trip. It wouldn't be appropriate for you to be there." Rebecca's words came out in a rush, as if she had rehearsed them, but still couldn't make them sound convincing. I looked at Dave, hoping for some clarification, some explanation that would make this make sense. He finally met my eyes for a split second before looking away again. "Sorry, Anna. Company policy stuff. You know how it is." But I didn't know how it was. What I knew was that my daughter was lying to me. In all my years of experience reading people, of navigating the complexities of human relationships, I could tell when someone was being dishonest. The set of Rebecca's shoulders, the way she kept touching her earring, the fact that she wouldn't hold eye contact for more than a second. These were all tells I recognized from when she was a teenager trying to explain why she was late for curfew. "Rebecca, honey, if there's a problem, we can work it out. I could stay in a different hotel or—" "Mom, no, it's already decided. I'm really sorry, but you need to go home." Her voice had taken on that sharp edge I remembered from her teenage years, the tone that meant the discussion was over whether I liked it or not. I stood there in the middle of Gate 42, surrounded by the noise and bustle of travelers, feeling like I was disappearing right before my own eyes. The excitement I had felt just moments before curdled into something much darker. Humiliation. Rejection. The kind of deep, bone-deep hurt that comes from being discarded by someone you thought loved you unconditionally. "But I've already paid for everything," I said quietly, hating how small my voice sounded. "The hotel, the activities, We'll figure that out later," Rebecca interrupted, glancing impatiently at the departure board. "Look, they're about to start boarding. We really need to go." Emma, who is 12 and has always been perceptive, tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, why can't Grandma Anna come with us? You said she was excited about seeing the monkeys." Rebecca's jaw tightened. "Emma, go sit with your father. This is grown-up business." I knelt down to Emma's level, forcing a smile I didn't feel. "It's okay, sweetheart. Grandma has some things to take care of at home anyway. You have a wonderful time and take lots of pictures for me, okay?" Emma nodded solemnly, and I could see in her young face that she knew something wasn't right but didn't understand what. Michael, who is 9, was already engrossed in his tablet, oblivious to the drama unfolding around him. The boarding announcement crackled over the loudspeaker. "Now boarding Flight 447 to San Jose, Costa Rica. We'll begin with our first class, passengers and those requiring special assistance." Rebecca's face brightened immediately. "That's us. Dave, get the bags." I watched in stunned disbelief as my daughter gathered her family, preparing to board the plane without me. Without another word, without even a proper goodbye. "Rebecca, wait!" I called out, my voice stronger now despite the tears threatening to spill over. "Is this really how you want to leave things? Is this how you want your children to remember this moment?" She turned back to me, and for just a second, I saw a flicker of something that might have been guilt cross her face. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. But it was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. "I'm sorry, Mom. I really am. But this is just how it has to be. I'll call you when we get back." And with that, she was gone. My daughter, my only child, the person I had sacrificed everything for, walked away from me without looking back. She handed her boarding pass to the gate agent, ushered her family down the jetway, and disappeared from my sight. I stood there for a long time after their plane pushed back from the gate. Other passengers came and went. Other families reunited and separated. other lives continued moving forward while mine felt completely frozen. The woman at the gate counter kept glancing at me with concern, probably wondering why this elderly woman was standing alone in the departure area, looking like she had just witnessed a tragedy. In many ways, I had. The walk back through the airport was the longest of my life. Every step felt like an admission of failure, of not being important enough, of not mattering to the person who mattered most to me. I passed other travelers hurrying to catch their flights, saw families embracing, watched couples holding hands as they navigated the terminal together. Each scene was a reminder of what I didn't have, what I had just lost. When I finally made it back to the main terminal, I sat down heavily in one of the uncomfortable plastic chairs near the baggage claim. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone to call a taxi, but as I scrolled through my contacts, something shifted inside me. The hurt was still there, raw and immediate, but it was being joined by something else, something that felt like anger, but cleaner, more purposeful. As I sat there in the airport, watching other people's lives unfold around me, I realized that Rebecca had made a fundamental mistake. She assumed that because I was her mother, because I was older, because I had always been there for her, that I would simply accept this treatment. She assumed that I would go home, nurse my wounds in private, and be ready to pretend nothing had happened when she decided to call me again. She assumed wrong. For the first time in years, maybe decades, I felt something I had almost forgotten. I was capable of feeling. Resolve. Not the quiet, steady resolve of a mother doing what needed to be done for her family, but the fierce, uncompromising resolve of a woman who had finally reached her limit. I scrolled past the taxi company's number in my phone and kept looking until I found what I was looking for. A number I hadn't called in months, but one I knew by heart. Peterson Aviation Services. A professional voice answered on the second ring. "This is Anna Washington," I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. "I need to book a flight to Chicago, immediately." "Of course, Mrs. Washington. Will this be the usual aircraft?" "Yes, and please have them file a flight plan for departure within the hour." "Certainly. Will there be any other passengers today?" I thought about Rebecca's shocked face, about the way she had dismissed me so casually, about the years of being taken for granted that had led to this moment. "No," I said firmly, "just me. And please ask them to prepare the cabin for a working flight. I'll need the table set up and the communication systems ready. I have some important calls to make." As I hung up the phone and gathered my things, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a very long time. Power. Not the kind that comes from money or position, but the kind that comes from finally deciding you've had enough of being treated as less than you are. Rebecca thought she was discarding her burdensome mother at the airport gate. What she had actually done was force me to remember who Anna Washington really was beneath all those years of putting everyone else first. She was about to find out that some lessons are harder to learn than others, and that some people are much more dangerous when they've been pushed too far. The announcement for their flight's departure echoed through the terminal as I walked toward the private aviation section of the airport. Rebecca was probably settling into her first-class seat right about now, maybe even feeling relieved that she didn't have to deal with her mother's presence on what she had planned as her perfect family vacation. But they didn't know what I was capable of. They had no idea who they were really dealing with. As I approached the sleek glass doors that led to the private aviation terminal, I caught my reflection in the glass. The woman looking back at me wasn't the same person who had arrived at Gate 42 full of excitement and anticipation. This woman had steel in her spine and fire in her eyes. This woman was done being dismissed. The uniformed attendant at the private terminal greeted me with the kind of respectful professionalism I had forgotten I deserved. "Good morning, Mrs. Washington. Your aircraft is ready for departure. May I assist you with your luggage?" "Thank, you?" I replied, handing over my small carry-on. "And please let the pilots know that once we're airborne, I'll need complete privacy in the cabin. I have some very important business to conduct. As I walked across the tarmac toward the waiting aircraft, I thought about all the times Rebecca had made assumptions about my life, my capabilities, my resources. She saw me as her aging mother who lived quietly in the suburbs, who sent birthday cards and Christmas gifts, who was always available when needed but never really considered beyond that utility. She had no idea that I had been living a carefully constructed version of myself, one designed to make her feel independent and successful. She had no idea what I was really capable of when pushed to my limits. The leather seats of the aircraft embraced me like an old friend as I settled in for the flight to Chicago. As we taxied toward the runway, I opened my phone and began scrolling through a very different set of contacts than the ones I had used for calling taxis and making dinner reservations. These were numbers that connected me to people who could change lives with a phone call. People who had been waiting for me to remember that I was more than just somebody's mother. The engines spooled up for takeoff, and I felt the familiar rush of acceleration as we left the ground. Somewhere below us, Rebecca's commercial flight was probably still waiting in the departure queue, delayed by the morning's air traffic. How fitting that I would reach my destination before she even left the ground. I had raised my daughter to be strong and independent, never realizing that in doing so, I had forgotten to remain strong and independent myself. But that morning, at Gate 42 had been a wake-up call I couldn't ignore. Some people need to lose everything to remember who they really are. Rebecca was about to learn that lesson the hard way. As Chicago's skyline came into view through the aircraft window, I felt a sense of purpose I hadn't experienced in years. My daughter thought she had abandoned me at that airport gate, left me behind like unwanted baggage. What she had actually done was set me free. The flight to Chicago gave me time to think, really think, for the first time in months. As the Gulf Stream cut through the clouds at 35,000 feet, I found myself remembering things I had deliberately pushed aside, moments when I should have recognized the pattern forming between Rebecca and me. There was the Christmas when she had insisted on hosting dinner at her house, then spent the entire day treating me like hired help. Mom, can you watch the kids while I finish the appetizers? Mom, can you set the table? Mom, can you clean up the kitchen? Not once did she ask if I needed help, if I was tired, if I wanted to sit down and actually enjoy the holiday I had helped create. When I finally suggested that maybe we could work together on the meal, she had laughed and said, "Oh, Mom, you know I like to do things my way. Just relax and let me handle it." But relaxing had meant becoming invisible, useful only when needed. Or the time Rebecca's washing machine broke and she called me in tears. Not because she was upset about the appliance, but because she had no idea how she was going to manage without it for the week it would take to get it repaired. I had driven over immediately with my checkbook, intending to help her find a replacement. Instead, I found myself at the laundromat with 3 loads of her family's laundry while she went to her yoga class. "You're so good at this domestic stuff, Mom. I never learned how to do laundry at a laundromat." At the time, I had felt useful, needed. Looking back, I realized I had been convenient. The pattern was so clear now that I was finally willing to see it. Rebecca loved me the way people love a reliable appliance, with gratitude when it worked, with frustration when it didn't, and with the absolute assumption that it would always be there when needed. She had never seen me as a person with my own desires, my own plans, my own dignity that could be wounded. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, interrupting my thoughts. "Mrs. Washington, we're beginning our descent into Chicago. We should have you on the ground in about 20 minutes. "Thank you, Captain Miller," I replied, pressing the intercom button. "Has my car been arranged?" "Yes, ma'am. There will be a driver waiting for you at the terminal." I had been making this trip to Chicago once a month for the past 15 years, though Rebecca had no idea. She thought I spent my time playing bridge with the church ladies and tending my garden. She had no clue that I owned a 40% stake in Morrison Financial Holdings, one of the most successful investment firms in the Midwest. She didn't know that the quiet little house I lived in was paid for with cash, or that my monthly bridge games were actually board meetings conducted in the private dining room of the Drake Hotel. Walter and I had built Morrison Financial from nothing back in the 70s, when women in business were still fighting for every seat at every table. After he died, I had quietly stepped back from the day-to-day operations, but I had never stepped away from ownership. The firm's quarterly reports were delivered to my house in unmarked envelopes, and my share of the profits were deposited into accounts that Rebecca had never seen. I had chosen to live modestly not because I had to, but because I wanted Rebecca to feel successful in her own right. I wanted her to believe that her MBA from Northwestern, her marketing director position, her comfortable suburban lifestyle were all products of her own hard work and intelligence. I had thought I was giving her the gift of independence. Instead, I had given her the gift of taking me for granted. The plane touched down smoothly at Midway, and within minutes I was settling into the back seat of the black sedan that had been waiting for me. The driver, Thomas, had been picking me up for these monthly trips for years. He was one of the few people who knew both versions of Anna Washington, the quiet suburban grandmother and the sharp-eyed businesswoman who could read a profit and loss statement like others read novels. "Good to see you again, Mrs. Washington," Thomas said as he pulled away from the terminal. "Straight to Morrison Financial?" "Actually, Thomas, I need to make a stop first. Please take me to Patterson, Webb & Associates on LaSalle Street." Thomas caught my eye in the rearview mirror. "The law firm? Are you all right, ma'am? Is there anything I should be concerned about?" His genuine worry touched something in me that Rebecca's casual dismissal had bruised. "I'm fine, Thomas." "Better. Then fine, actually. I'm just finally taking care of some business that's been put off too long." The law offices of Patterson, Webb & Associates occupied 3 floors of a gleaming tower in Chicago's financial district. I had been coming here for various business matters for over a decade, but today felt different. Today, I wasn't here to review contracts or discuss estate planning. Today, I was here to make a point. Jonathan Patterson himself came out to greet me in the reception area, which was unusual. Normally, I worked with one of the junior partners on routine matters. But there must have been something in my voice when I called from the plane that suggested this wasn't routine. "Anna, it's wonderful to see you," Jonathan said, extending his hand. He was a distinguished man in his 60s, with the kind of silver hair that made him look like Central Casting's idea of a successful attorney. "Though I have to admit, your call intrigued me. You mentioned wanting to discuss some family financial arrangements?" "Yes," I said simply. "Is your conference room available? This may take some time." Jonathan led me down a hallway lined with oil paintings of former partners and into a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago River. The room was designed to impress, with its mahogany table and leather chairs, but I barely noticed the decor. My focus was entirely on what I needed to accomplish. "Can I have Margaret bring you some coffee? Water?" Jonathan asked as we settled into chairs across from each other. "Coffee would be lovely, thank you." I needed the caffeine, but more than that, I needed a few moments to organize my thoughts. What I was about to set in motion would change everything between Rebecca and me, and I wanted to be absolutely certain I was making the right choice. While we waited for the coffee, Jonathan spread several manila folders across the table. "I took the liberty of pulling your files when you called. Your estate planning documents, the Morrison Financial Partnership agreements, the trust arrangements. What specifically did you want to discuss?" I accepted the steaming cup of coffee from Margaret, Jonathan's assistant, and took a careful sip before answering. The liquid was perfectly prepared, strong but not bitter, much like the resolve I was feeling. "Jonathan, I need you to help me teach my daughter a lesson about respect. And I need you to do it in a way that's completely legal, but absolutely unmistakable." He raised an eyebrow. "I see. What exactly has happened?" I told him about the airport, about Rebecca's casual dismissal, about the years of being treated like a convenience rather than a person. As I spoke, I could see Jonathan's expression shift from polite interest to genuine concern, to something that looked like protective anger on my behalf. "How long has this pattern been going on?" he asked when I finished. "Years, maybe decades. I think I've been so focused on being the mother I thought she needed that I forgot to be the woman I actually am." Jonathan leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "What did you have in mind?" "I want you to prepare documents that will revoke all financial support I've been providing to Rebecca and her family. The down payment I gave them for their house, the monthly supplement to their mortgage payment, the children's private school tuition, the vacation funds, all of it. I want it stopped immediately." "Anna," Jonathan said carefully, "are you sure about this? Family financial disputes can become very messy, very quickly." "I'm not disputing anything," I replied firmly. "I'm simply choosing to stop subsidizing people who don't respect me enough to treat me with basic human decency." Jonathan made notes on a legal pad as I outlined exactly what I wanted done. The list was longer than even I had realized until I started saying it out loud. Over the years, I had been quietly supporting Rebecca's lifestyle in ways she had either forgotten about or chosen to ignore. The down payment on their house in the expensive suburb had come from me. The monthly check that allowed them to afford their mortgage payments came from me. The tuition for Emma and Michael's private school came from me. The family vacations, the new cars every few years, Rebecca's shopping habits, the children's extracurricular activities, all of it was subsidized by money from my accounts that Rebecca assumed would always be there. "Jonathan, I also want you to prepare a letter explaining these changes. I want Rebecca to understand exactly what she's losing and why she's losing it. But I want the tone to be professional, not emotional. This isn't about revenge. It's about consequences." "How much notice do you want to give them?" Jonathan asked. I thought about Rebecca sitting in first class on her way to Costa Rica, probably not giving me a second thought now that I was no longer her problem. 30 days. That's more than enough time for them to figure out how to manage their own finances. "And what about the children's education? Are you comfortable with the possibility that they might have to change schools?" This was the part that hurt the most. Emma and Michael were innocent in all of this. They loved me genuinely, without agenda or expectation. But they were also Rebecca's responsibility, not mine. The children will be fine. Their parents make good salaries. They'll just have to make different choices about how they spend their money. Jonathan spent the next 2 hours drafting documents while I made phone calls from his office. First, I called my bank and instructed them to stop all automatic transfers to Rebecca's accounts. Then I called the private school and informed them that I would no longer be responsible for tuition payments after the current semester ended. Each call felt like shedding a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. By late afternoon, Jonathan had prepared a comprehensive packet of documents that would effectively end my financial support of Rebecca's family. The letter explaining the changes was exactly what I had requested: professional, clear, and utterly final. "Anna, before you sign these," Jonathan said, "I want to make sure you understand that this will likely cause significant disruption in your daughter's life. Are you prepared for the possibility that she might not forgive you for this?" I thought about that morning at the airport, about the casual cruelty with which Rebecca had dismissed me, about all the times over the years when she had treated me like an inconvenience rather than a person, about the conversations we should have had but never did, because she was always too busy or too distracted or too sure that I would always be there no matter how she treated me. "Jonathan, I've spent the last 8 years since Walter died trying to be the perfect mother and grandmother. I've put Rebecca's wants and needs ahead of my own dignity. I've made myself small so she could feel big And this morning, she left me standing alone at an airport gate like I was baggage she didn't want to carry. I picked up Jonathan's Mont Blanc pen and signed my name to each document with steady hands. If she can't forgive me for expecting to be treated with respect by my own daughter, then maybe forgiveness isn't what this relationship needs. Maybe it needs honesty. Jonathan gathered the signed documents and placed them in a manila envelope. These will be couriered to her house tomorrow morning. She'll receive them before she returns from Costa Rica. Good. I want her to have time to think about things before she calls me. Because she will call me, probably screaming. And what will you say to her? I stood up and smoothed my skirt, feeling more like myself than I had in years. I'll tell her the truth. That love without respect isn't love at all. It's just convenient exploitation. As Thomas drove me back to the airport, I watched Chicago's skyline fade in the distance. In a few hours, I would be back in my quiet house, surrounded by the carefully maintained illusion of my simple life. But something fundamental had shifted. I was no longer the woman who would accept being dismissed by her own daughter. I was no longer the woman who would prioritize keeping peace over keeping her dignity. The flight home gave me time to think about what came next. Rebecca would receive the documents tomorrow, probably while she was still in Costa Rica. She would spend the rest of her vacation trying to figure out how to manage without my financial support. She would realize, perhaps for the first time, exactly how much of her comfortable lifestyle depended on my quiet generosity. And then she would call me. I found myself looking forward to that conversation in a way that surprised me. For years, our phone calls had been superficial exchanges of pleasantries and logistics. Rebecca updating me on the children's activities, telling me about work stress, asking for advice she never intended to take. I listened and supported and agreed, because that's what mothers do. But that woman, the agreeable mother who never made waves, had been left behind at gate 42 that morning. The woman coming home from Chicago was someone different, someone who had remembered that she had power and choices and the absolute right to be treated with dignity by the people she loved. As the plane began its descent, I realized that Rebecca had done me an enormous favor by abandoning me at that airport gate. She had forced me to remember who Anna Washington really was beneath all those years of selfless motherhood. She had reminded me that I was more than just somebody's mother or grandmother. I was a woman who had built a successful business from nothing, a woman who had navigated the male-dominated world of finance in the 1970s and 1980s and emerged victorious. A woman who had raised a daughter as a single mother after Walter's death, while simultaneously running a multi-million-dollar company. Somehow, in my effort to give Rebecca space to be successful in her own right, I had forgotten to be successful in mine. That was going to change. The next morning, I woke up in my own bed for the first time in months, without that underlying anxiety that had become so familiar I had stopped noticing it. The anxiety of wondering when Rebecca would need something, when the next crisis would require my intervention, when I would be called upon to solve problems that weren't mine to solve. Instead, I felt calm, purposeful, free. I made myself a proper breakfast, not the quick coffee and toast I usually grabbed on my way to handle someone else's emergency, but eggs Benedict with fresh hollandaise sauce and real orange juice squeezed. From oranges I had bought because I liked them, not because they were on sale or because someone else preferred them. At exactly 9:00 a.m., my phone rang. The caller ID showed Morrison Financial Holdings. "Anna, it's David Morrison," came the familiar voice of my business partner's son, who had taken over much of the day-to-day operations when his father retired. "I hope you don't mind me calling so early, but we've had an interesting development." "What kind of development?" I asked, settling into my favorite chair with my second cup of coffee. "The Hartwell Group wants to meet with us about a potential merger. It would be a significant expansion of our client base, but they're insisting on meeting with all the major partners. That includes you, Anna. They want to meet the woman behind 40% of Morrison Financial." I smiled. How refreshing. When do they want to meet? Next week, if possible. I know you've been keeping a lower profile recently, but, David, that lower profile was a choice, not a necessity. Schedule the meeting. It's time for Anna Washington to step back into the light. After I hung up, I sat in my living room looking around at the carefully maintained modesty of my surroundings. The furniture was comfortable but not expensive. The artwork was pleasant but not valuable. Everything about my home was designed to project the image of a widow living on a modest fixed income. But that image had served its purpose. Rebecca was independent now, successful in her own career, financially stable in her own right. Or at least she had been until yesterday, when I had removed the safety net she didn't know she was using. It was time for me to stop hiding who I really was. I spent the rest of the morning making phone calls, reactivating parts of my life that I had put on hold. I called my personal shopper at Nordstrom and scheduled an appointment to update my wardrobe. I called my real estate agent and asked her to start looking for a penthouse apartment in the downtown area. I called my financial advisor and asked him to prepare a complete portfolio review. Anna Washington was coming out of retirement. By noon, I had transformed my quiet Tuesday morning into a day of major life changes. It felt exhilarating in a way I had almost forgotten was possible. For the first time in years, I was making decisions based on what I wanted, not on what would be most convenient for someone else. My phone buzzed with a text message from Rebecca. Having an amazing time. In Costa Rica. The resort is incredible. Thanks for understanding about the trip, Mom. Talk soon. I stared at the message for a long time. The casual dismissal, the complete lack of awareness about how her behavior had affected me, the assumption that I was fine with being discarded because it was convenient for her. Rebecca had no idea that her entire financial world was about to shift dramatically. But she would know soon enough. I deleted the text without responding and went back to planning my new life. The life of a woman who had finally remembered that she deserved better than being taken for granted by the people who claimed to love her most. The documents arrived at Rebecca's house on Thursday morning, just as I had planned. I knew this, because I had specifically requested delivery confirmation from the courier service. At 10:47 a.m., someone at 1247 Maple Grove Lane had signed for an envelope containing the most important wake-up call of my daughter's adult life. I spent that Thursday in a remarkably productive state of mind. I had an appointment with Sarah Chen, my personal shopper at Nordstrom, who seemed genuinely delighted to hear from me after months of dormancy. We spent 3 hours selecting a wardrobe that reflected who I actually was rather than who I had been pretending to be. Gone were the conservative cardigans and sensible flats that screamed harmless grandmother. In their place, we chose tailored. Blazers in rich jewel tones, silk blouses that draped elegantly, and shoes with enough heel to remind people that I was a force to be reckoned with. Mrs. Washington, if you don't mind me saying so, you seem different today, Sarah observed as she helped me select a stunning navy blue dress that probably cost more than Rebecca thought I spent on clothing in an entire year. More confident. More yourself, if that makes sense. It makes perfect sense, I replied, admiring how the dress fit my 73-year-old figure with the kind of elegance that comes from quality construction and expert tailoring. I've been hiding my light under a bushel for far too long. It's time to let it shine again. That afternoon, I had lunch with Margaret Henley, my real estate agent at the Four Seasons. Margaret had been handling discrete property transactions for me for years, managing the rental properties I owned downtown while maintaining the fiction that I was just another suburban retiree living on Social Security and Walter's modest pension. Anna, I have to ask, Margaret said over her Cobb salad. What's prompted this sudden interest in upgrading your living situation? The properties I've shown you are quite different from your current home. I took a sip of my Chardonnay and considered how much to reveal. Let's just say I've recently realized that I've been living beneath my means for reasons that are no longer relevant. Margaret nodded knowingly. She had been in real estate long enough to recognize when clients were making life changes driven by more than simple preference. "Well, whatever the reason, I think you'll love the penthouse at Millennium Towers. It's just come on the market, and it has the kind of sophisticated elegance that I think would suit you perfectly." The penthouse was everything I hadn't allowed myself to want for the past 8 years. Floor-to-ceiling windows with panoramic views of the city skyline, a kitchen designed for someone who actually enjoyed cooking rather than just heating up, casseroles for church potlucks, and a master suite that felt like a luxury hotel rather than the spare bedroom I had been camping in since Walter's death. "The current owners are motivated sellers," Margaret explained as we stood on the terrace, looking out over the carefully manicured grounds. "They're relocating to Europe for business. I think we could negotiate a very favorable price if you're serious about making an offer." "I'm serious," I said without hesitation. "Draw up the paperwork. I want to make a cash offer today." Margaret's eyebrows rose slightly, but she was too professional to comment on my apparent ability to make a cash offer on a $2 million penthouse. "Of course, I'll have the contracts ready for your review by tomorrow morning." As I drove home that evening, I felt a sense of anticipation that had nothing to do with new clothes or new living arrangements. Rebecca and her family were scheduled to return from Costa Rica on Friday evening. By Saturday morning, she would have had time to review the documents that had been delivered to her house. By Saturday afternoon, my phone would ring. I found myself genuinely curious about what she would say. Would she be angry, confused? Would she try to negotiate or simply demand an explanation? Rebecca had always been articulate when she wanted something, and she definitely wanted my financial support to continue. The question was whether she understood that wanting something and deserving it were not the same thing. Friday